Wish you were one of those influencers with raving fans who binge on your every word, consume all your content, buy everything you have to sell, and demand even more? Then stay tuned while Authority Magazine columnist and BuzzFeed contributor Tracy Hazard shares strategies, tips, and tactics from top videocasters, podcasters, authors, and social influencers on creating that bingeable factor. Now, let's join Tracy as she explores how to rise above all the digital noise with the binge factor.
Hey everyone, let's talk value today. How about Generate Your Value? Doesn't that sound like a great show name? Well, it's Andy McDowell's show, and Generate Your Value is just what it says it's going to be, right? It's a whole value-based show, and I just love that someone can really hone in and focus on that. So let me tell you a little bit about Andy. Andy is an engineer by trade and a creative by nature. He spent 22 years with Boeing, where he felt like a life coach rather than a boss. And in 2002, he began his journey into entrepreneurship within the corporation. And when he was asked to develop an aerospace design consulting business from scratch that would serve as a global government market. He's got a bachelor's degree from Georgia Tech in electrical engineering and a master's degree in computer information systems from Georgia State. Naturally, his aviation work took him from around the world and enabled him to work on high-profile projects such as preparing the Beijing and Sochi airports for the respective Olympic Games. So Andy has built Generate Your Value podcast, and it helps you with your personal and your professional life. And it has a keen sense for applying business concepts into life coaching and life coaching concepts into business. And he loves that crossover. So I just had so much fun with my conversation here that you're going to hear shortly with Andy about Generate Your Value, how it came about, how it works. And the thing that I wanted you to pay the most attention to is the fact that this is on-air coaching, right? Like this is a way to really demonstrate your value in process. That's what he's doing there. And, he talks about things like how in a show about how creativity impacts value, how business tools that improve things. And he's sharing all of that generously through his show as well and giving you an on-air view of what it's like to work with him. And that's a really unusual model that not everyone does really well, but I think Andy does. And that's why I brought him on the show today. So we're going to talk about Generate Your Value with Andy McDowell. Andy, thank you so much for being on the show. And I'm excited to talk about Generate Your Value because I'm all about value podcasting here. So what I really want to hear is that starting story. Like, when did you decide that it was going to be valuable for you to podcast?
Well, I just thought I had a lot to offer in terms of life experiences, business experiences. And, it's all about finding your tribe, right? So if you don't put your message out there with a wide net, and sort of gather your tribe, gather your community in around the show, then you're not truly adding value to the world and to people and individuals. So it's all about the opportunity. I'm showing up, so to speak, with my opportunity with the show, and hopefully I, putting my light up like the Statue of Liberty to say I'm here, and hopefully gather some people around and have conversation that hopefully brings value to their life. That's why I did it.
Well, your show dynamic is interesting because you have a co-host, Zach Levy, and you guys have a conversation between the two of you sometimes, which are topic based and both your viewpoints on things. And then of course you have your interviews with your guests as well. So now those topic shows, are you finding that they're doing better, and do you enjoy them more?
Oh, yes, I enjoy more. Almost our first season was strictly just Zach and I talking. I set up the show to be an example of what time spent with me as a coach would be like, right? So I specifically went after Zach because he's a young small business owner. He just turned 28. He's an old soul, very wise for his age. And to be able to have these topics or conversations about a particular topic, just much like a coach would have a conversation with a guest or a client on a specific topic that we were working on together, and to sort of model that with the hopes that if a listener hears that and sees that dynamic and they have an interest in coming on as a client with me, they already know what to expect, in terms of my demeanor and the way I approach things, my philosophies about life and business and so forth. So it's it's a little more comforting, if you will, to already have some exposure to that as opposed to coming in blind, so to speak.
Right.
With me.
Absolutely.
So it was all very intentional about the way I set it up with a co-host.
That's great. And your interactions with Zach, it's gotten deeper and deeper over time. I listened to some of the early episodes and some of the recent ones. And now it feels like Zach's more of a contributor, right? You kind of come into this model where you're co-creating in a way.
Yeah, well, Zach is family now, and even says that about me. Recently got promoted to regional vice president within his organization, had a big celebration, and he stood up and said that to about 25 people in the room that and he's not blood, but he's family, and that's why he's here from that perspective. And the whole way it got started is Zach and I were in the same closed networking group. He's the very first person I met in the group, so has it. But we found ourselves getting together on my back porch over a glass of bourbon, he and his wife, Megan, who he's in business with. And we affectionately start calling them B&B sessions for business and bourbon. And,
I like that. Maybe your next podcast name.
Well, maybe. His wife's from Kentucky, and she's educated me so much on bourbon. I'm Irish, so whiskey just comes naturally for me. But we were just sitting around. I'm a big believer in love versus fear. And we were having a discussion in one B&B session about fears. And so I just straight asked Zach, what's one fear that you have that you'd like to work on? And I'd already had in my head to think about starting a podcast. And he said, well, I've always had a dream of starting a podcast, and I just haven't really pulled the trigger, and that might be something I'd like to work on. It was just like, okay, the universe is working here.
It was meant to be.
Well, so has I want to start a podcast. How would you like to join me in this adventure? And as you say, the rest is history from that standpoint. And as you said, just spending more and more time together and being aligned in terms of our thoughts about life and so forth from our own work experiences and life experiences. It's just been a great partnership.
That's wonderful. I'm curious as to whether or not doing the podcast has shifted actually the way that you work with your clients, because you sort of discovered things that are working and in a different way.
Yeah, in some ways, Zach is a test subject for me from that perspective. So, sometimes conversations that I have with Zach, you're in a podcast, just kind of thinking out loud in a way through the podcast, and you make a mental note like, wow, there's an idea I hadn't thought about that just sort of popped in my head from the podcast, and I'll try it out on a client, and usually it works.
That's so interesting. I love it. What, but it's interesting dynamic because a lot of coaching is listening, right? And, and this is talking. So it's a little bit different model. You've had to essentially modify your coaching method.
Yes. But, with a podcast, being it goes around the world, you may never even have the opportunity to have a lot of people as a client, right? So you're trying to distribute some knowledge, some golden nuggets, as I call it, that they might be able to take and integrate within their own life and get some value out of it and improve their life in some way or in some area of their life. And so you've got to speak to it. You got to speak to the concepts and so forth in that effort. So you're right. It's the opposite. It's a lot of talking versus listening. But in some respects, I have to listen to Zach. So.
Right. And that's why I say that lately it sounds more like co-creating, right? Because there is such the interchange between the two of you. Mm-hmm. Well, so when you first started, when Zach says, okay, I've had this idea and you've had this idea. What was the most difficult part about starting your show?
Oh, just never having done it before. So I've never had to edit audio. I've never bought equipment.
So you went in the whole do-it-yourself model.
I went the whole do-it-yourself model. The early ones that you may have listened to, back behind me is a granite kitchen counter that I was attaching mics to, and I got hardwood floors, and the sound was bouncing everywhere and so forth. And
your sound's much better as you go along, which is the case for almost every show. I
actually invested in a table, a portable table that I put the mics to, and put some sound deadening material on top of the table. And we do it now over top of a shag rug. And
I
This
bet that
got
helps
better, much
the
better
editing a
sound
lot.
quality. The editing and sound quality is just so much better. And it's just trial and error, trying things and just having a continuous improvement kind of mindset. Like, how can I do this a little bit better? I switched up music in season 2 and so forth. So it's just a learning curve. You just got to see it as a journey, and uh, grows you go along the journey.
So you do something interesting that I want everyone who's listening out there to go check out the show. Go check out Generate Your Value, because what you guys do is a co-introduction, which is really kind of an interesting thing. Usually when there's co-hosts, they usually have a voiceover artist that'll mention and introduce both of you. But you each introduce yourselves. And I think it's a really great model, because I now can associate the person with the voice, which is really good. Because otherwise you tend to forget to remind people who you are. When it is for Tom Hazard and I, it's easy because, I'm the female voice. It's not that hard to figure out who's who. But when you have 2 male voices, which one's Andy, which one's Zach? I want to know. But by introducing yourselves, you kind of eliminated the need for that. And it's kind of nice. Zach always said something nice about his wife on the in that intro. And it's really nicely done. It's personal. And it invites everyone in. And because you're having this on-air coaching model, it actually makes for, I think, a better style of introduction than the more formal one that's typical with podcasts.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. And I wanted Zach, even though it's under my company's moniker, and it deals with the things that I directly deal with as opposed to his financial services business, I still wanted him to feel like he was a partner in this. And that was just one way that I could get him to feel that way is, I may be more in age, more in life experience, job experience, and it's under my moniker and so forth. But I know it's an investment in time and your busy schedule and so forth to drive down to my place and do this once a week and so forth. So I want you to feel like you're a partner in this. So
you have nice co-billing. I love it. It's a really smart choice, and it's not the choice that everyone would make. So I applaud you for that. It was a good choice for both of you.
We enjoy it. We enjoy it.
You also do a preamble at the beginning. So you have like a clip from something that you said. And now that I know that you're editing your own show, but how do you decide what the most impactful clip is? Do you have criteria for yourself?
Yeah, I put some thought after the conversation and the recording to what I thought was the main aha moment, or that tweetable moment, if you will, that's in the show. And I try to keep it around a minute. And so I try to grab the audio that's around that nugget that can fit into a minute and throw it in the beginning as sort of as a hook, as a catch to sort of draw you into the show, and maybe you'll be looking for it in the show as the main part, plays through and so forth. Or certainly the context around that 1 minute in that discussion. But, they often say, if you're a person that forgets people's names easily when you first meet them, you go into a cocktail party or a meeting and you introduce people, say, hi, I'm Andy. Nice to meet you. What's your name? My name's Tracy, so forth. And if you're one of those persons, like 15 seconds later, you're like, what was her name again, or whatever, that they teach you that trick of try and incorporate that person's name in a sentence like 2 or 3 times so that it gets ingrained in your head and you don't forget the rest of the conversation, right? So if it's the main item and you're playing it twice,
you're re-emphasizing it.
You're re-emphasizing, and it's a main point they're going to remember more, hopefully, than anything else. If they only take one item away from it, hopefully it's that main aha moment. And that's why
I love it. Are you repurposing that? Are you using it out on social? Are you using it when you share your
Not
episode?
at the moment, but I probably should be.
Well, there you go. There's a tip here for you. Yeah. I mean, I think that, 1 minute clips, 30-second clips are really ideal for repurposing. I mean, look at TikTok videos, and I mean, you can use them as audiograms if you don't have video files. And I think that's a great plan, because you've got you already have your message selected. So
yeah, that's sort of in the plans for this year, to get more involved in these little snippets of video out on my social media with just myself, talking about my platform and ideas, and what makes me special, so to speak.
Great. Well, I hope you're going to be doing that on LinkedIn, because I think that's where your most value, where you'll generate the most value.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, good.
Absolutely.
Well, let me do your three questions that I ask everyone here on the Binge Factor.
Mhm.
And so, the first one is about getting great guests. And you've only recently started getting guests on the show. So, not since the very beginning, but you've been doing that, and you have really interesting guests with very different backgrounds. And so I'm curious
Yes.
about how you get them and how you decide if they're going to be of value to the show.
Well, it's been interesting being a season and a half to 3/4 into this journey, putting enough content out there. All of a sudden, I got people approaching me.
So they've been coming to you. So then you have the choice
It's
of
not
who.
all of them. Not all of them are that way, but one of the interesting ones that I did was with a young gentleman who's now turned a rapper, but was an entrepreneur before that, and his PR team approached me out of the blue, and I'm saying to myself, why did you pick us? But he's got such a tremendous story, because usually it's a flip-flop, right? That you have people that go out there and become musicians and make their money that way, and then they decide to take that money and go invest it in businesses, start businesses, or invest in an existing business. And he was the exact opposite. He just has a tremendous story. So I took him on as a guest and had a great experience with him. So that's one way. I've been working with a company to help me get on other podcasts, and I've actually been drawing from their other customers.
So you're asking them for referrals.
Asking them for referrals. Say, hey, pick my podcast as just like you do with the hundreds of others that you're looking at. Look at my podcast and where you think they're good fits. Let's bring them on. Networking folks that are in my network who I think have interesting stories. I'm really about the story of entrepreneurship, and that's what really interests me, that there's millions of ways to skin the cat, as they say,
Right.
and becoming an entrepreneur. And there's so many flavors of being an entrepreneur that I want to get people excited about it, and not say, well, I have to be an Elon Musk. I have to fit in this box. Otherwise, entrepreneurship is not available to me. And I want to cry, nope.
Nope. Let's talk about the different ways that you become an entrepreneur.
Not at all. Just like when people tell me they're not creative, I'm like, nope, you're just not exercising that muscle. You've got fears or whatever else stopping you in the way, but every human being is creative. It's just about you exercising that muscle. And I've got great examples in my own life about that I can share with them. But I want to tell the story.
And that's
what I'm looking for, is the good stories that we might be able to pull little nuggets out of in terms of the concepts and the things that Zach and I talk about. But
right. So now when you do the interviews, do you tend to just have your next follow-up discussion, the topic based, where you sort of, maybe dive deeper into something that was mentioned, one of the golden nuggets you got out of it? Do you do that frequently?
Yes. If I feel like it's a subject that we haven't talked a whole lot about, I mean, there's certain subjects like love and fear that we've talked a lot about.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go do another episode about it, but if there's something that maybe we've only done one or only touched a little bit about it, yes, we'll go do that topic and use the example of that the guest. So
you're tying your episodes together. That's always a good model, right?
as much as you can connect the dots, the more I think you're going to keep an audience around and follow you on a journey. Zach and I say it all the time on our podcast is, and you may have heard it, where we say, hit that button. It's labeled subscribe, but for us, it's the follow button. Follow us on this journey of the podcast and conversation and the guests, and hit your buggy to our train, so to speak, and let's all go on a journey and see where we end up.
Well, let's talk about that. So, because the next question I always ask is about how you engage your community or enlarge your community, increasing listeners and eventually clients, because that's the ultimate goal there. But, how do you do that? And, you set out to build a community to, put out a wide net, as you put it before. And now that you're getting some people, how do you engage them more? How do you get them to go deeper in conversations with you?
Yeah, I think that's where we're falling down the most. Is in that piece. We encourage people to, both Zach and I are on all the major platforms in terms of LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. At least I'm on Twitter. I don't think Zach's on Twitter. But we're trying to get engaged and get people's ideas. I'm toying around with maybe doing some kind of Facebook community page or something to get more engagement, more conversation in these areas. But I think that's where our next level of growth is how do we get engagement beyond people just booting up their computer or their iPhone and listening to a podcast episode? How
So
can we
if I
make
can
this
make a
living and
suggestion,
breathing?
if I can make a suggestion to you,
Absolutely, fire away.
yeah, I think your audience is probably more on LinkedIn, as I mentioned
Yes.
earlier. Yeah. And I bet you that you probably get more clients through any kind of interactions, postings, messaging, introductions, things on referrals, maybe on LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
Try a LinkedIn newsletter and a LinkedIn group. They're both
Okay.
highly underutilized. So there's not as much competition for that. There's like millions and millions of Facebook groups and pages. And it's to the point where most people who are going to be the kind of person who would become your client are too busy to even scroll through and like accept or not accept the group notifications. And so it's not really working over on Facebook for everyone, but the LinkedIn ones seem to really work well, especially if they interact once within the group. They seem to get more information. There's a lot of ways to invite people into the group, like right through the model without having to do that sort of formal invite process. Like you can comment and tag someone and invite them in. So I think there's just a little bit more robustness to it that might work better for you.
Okay.
And I don't think, I think there's a lot of, I'm going to say personal branding experts who are on Facebook, but not on LinkedIn. And I think you could do better there.
Okay.
So
That's
there you
certainly
go.
where
A little on-air coaching.
well, it's certainly the target audience for, I mean, my target audience is those that are thinking about starting the business or those that have and want somebody in their corner. The biggest challenge I face in my business is the thought that, oh, I have to go hire a coach means that I'm in the ditch.
That's an interesting,
I'm in the ditch and I need somebody to help pull me out of the ditch, as opposed to I've got a partner in this that's going to help me get to the next level. It doesn't mean somebody who's making money and making a profit and so forth couldn't benefit from a coach, either from an accountability standpoint to refining leadership styles to anything that's going to help you take you to the next level. And
well, we were
I've always
talking
felt like
that
I'm trying to overcome that, is that mindset to say, if I have a coach, then that means I'm not, it's like going to the therapist. Right. It's just like,
Yeah.
I'm in
It's
the
like
ditch and I'm in trouble and
it's like a repair
nothing's working
situation,
right,
not a
and
proactive situation.
right.
Right.
I don't want that stigma. Oh, you got a coach. What's going wrong? You know, and it's not saying that
Well,
anything's
let's
going
start.
wrong.
We were talking before that you're right here where the Atlanta Falcons have their practices and other things, and they that's what a real coach is. A real coach has plays in their playbook that they can suggest. They help you with your fitness regime. You can imagine, like, that's a better coaching model. I don't know why we have a stigma in entrepreneurship that coaches are in this negative way when coaches everywhere else are a positive, a must-have, right?
No, I mean, I think I was a pretty good leader within Boeing, but then I got an executive coach and she took me to the next level. That's not to say I was in a ditch. It was about tweaking
where do you want to go next?
things, having an understanding of a 360 view of how I was perceived and what my brand was like and so forth. It just took me to the next level in my opinion. And she was a life changer for me. I was looking too much in the rearview mirror, and she's like, no, you got to be looking forward. You got to have a growth mindset and let's go.
Wonderful. Well, we were talking that we're on our 3 questions. The last of the 3 questions is about monetization and value. And you set out to make this a model for how you work so that others would see that. Have you found value in that outcome? Have you seen clients close faster because they have the podcast as an example, or have you seen them reach out to you and where you had no clue that they were out there listening to you? So have you seen some coaching clients come from the podcast?
It's starting. And mostly my clients in the past have been through referrals, networking and so forth, but it's just starting. We have enough content. We have enough exposure, if you will, that's starting to get some inquiries coming from the podcast.
Well, and
feeds.
you're right about that, about the right amount of content. You're over 50 episodes. You're at 63 at the time we're recording this. So, you've tipped over that point where they trust that you've been around enough. You've got enough for them to search through and get a feel for. So yeah, you're right at that point where it should be happening more and more.
Seriously, right? This is not a fly by night in the garage, kind of thing that, this is an important program, if you will, within my messaging and what value I feel like I have to offer, as well as Zach offer to the world. So we're serious about this. There's major things that have to happen in life and business. The world is in a crazy place right now and so forth. And I think the two of us have something to offer around that. And, I don't care if I'm down to my last penny, I'm going to keep doing this if I feel I can offer value to the world.
Well, you were talking about that windshield versus the rear view mirror idea. And so let's look at it from this perspective. What would you like to see happen in your show as an outcome from your show in terms of generating value for you and your business in the next year?
Well, I'm all about joy, happiness, and success, and for people to figure out what that is for themselves and then go after it. And to have enough introspection, take some time on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee or cup of tea or whatever it is, and get quiet and figure what that is for yourself, and then putting a life strategy together to go after it. And that's what I want out of my whole program. So I'm in the middle of writing a book, I've got the podcast, doing the coaching, hope to get on video here soon, and whatever, to just keep pounding the different channels, if you will, the different ways that people soak up information, to put it out there. It's a relationship, right? So you the listener have to show up too. I can sit here and put content all day, but if you don't have the proper mindset and a desire to go after it in terms of joy and happiness and success in your life, there's no reason for me in your life. But if that's something you want for yourself, then show up. Let's have a relationship, a conversation, and see if we can make it happen for you. And that's why I do what I do.
Absolutely. So, intentional. You talk a lot about that on the show, and you have, that is I think a part of your message is like, having your mindset, having your actions also in place though, so that it's not just, I'm thinking about this, I'm doing something to make this happen. That's the intention side of it.
Yeah. And so you may not have listened to this episode, but one of topic episodes that Zach and I did, I talk a lot about the analogy of the rubber dinghy versus the motorboat.
Interesting. That's
right. So if life is an ocean, are you in a rubber dinghy where you're just letting life push you around? You're not being introspective. You're not thinking about things. You're just sort of going with the flow, with whatever life pushes me. That's where I'll end up. Or are you being intentional about your life? Are you thinking about what defines your joy, happiness, and success in life? And you're developing a strategy. Now you're in a motorboat. You're going to a port of call. You know where you're going. You've got a map in front of you, and you've got a motor that's going to propel you in that direction. And oh, by the way, halfway in that journey, you decide you want to tweak that definition and go to a slightly different port of call. Not a problem. You're already heading basically the same direction. You make a little tweak in your navigation in the boat, and you end up at that port of call. So it's not to say, well, here's my strategy and I'm going to follow it all my years to get to that point. Some people may do that, but don't feel like it's set in stone and I can't tweak it and adjust it as I learn new things about yourself, the world, your community, your family, whatever it may be. You might do certain tweaks. And the week between Christmas and New Year's, I always do that introspective moment. I pull out my life plan.
Me too.
And I do those tweaks.
Yeah, that's
what did I learn about myself and the world this year, and how do I want to tweak this thing going forward for the years to come?
Yeah, I don't look at it like setting resolutions or anything. I look at it as like a reflection period and, and what worked and what didn't. And it's a decision time. And I'm going to cut some things out and I'm going to grasp onto some new things to take action on. So, yeah,
Exactly.
I love that. That's so great. Well, I want to, before I touch on your binge factor, I want to ask you the question of, you set your mind to you both were going to start a podcast. What are some of the first actions you took? Because I think others out there, I'm always asking everybody, give some advice for aspiring podcasts. And almost everybody says, well, just get started. So I'd love to know what some of the first actions you took. What are the first things that you educated yourself on, when you were getting started podcasting? If you can remember back now.
No, I can remember. So you're talking to a Georgia Tech electrical engineer. So the first part was all about the equipment, right? What do I need in terms of mics, speakers, computer, mixers? What how do I technically get this done first? And I was absolutely shocked at how low the cost was.
Yes.
I have a pretty good software-based mixer platform, and that was my most expensive item. And I probably came in at around $750.
Oh, that's really great. Yeah.
For three
you can do it
mics
for
and a
under
mixer
100 too, but yeah.
you can do it for under 100, but to have some,
when you've got co-hosts though, I recommend what you're doing, which is a slightly level with a mixing board, because it's just a little hard, especially when you're in person together. A little bit different if you're doing virtual co-hosting, but in person, it's harder. You're right. You do need a little more equipment.
With doing out of town interviews now with other folks, we're doing a little bit more of the Zoom calling piece between Zach and I still prefer in person. The sound quality is just that much better. That's where I started. And the second part was watching a lot of YouTube videos and so forth about content and how to, decide how the format was going to be. First year, I put very detailed outlines together, and I was handing it to Zach because I do all the content work for the show, particularly since it's under my moniker. And it sounded a little formalistic, I thought, after season 1. So now we just do 4 or 5 bullets of topics, and we just go with the flow. Here's the topics, maybe a little banter about some key points of those topics to hit, but it's much more conversational in nature this season.
Conversational. Yeah. That's the way I would say that it really, your topics really, when it's just the two of you, it's definitely very conversational. I mean, your interviews are that as well, but it's more common to expect that from an interview situation because you don't know what the other person's going to say.
Right.
But yeah, I think this is where your binge factor comes in. So on Generate Your Value, which hopefully generates your wealth, right?
Your wealth, yeah.
Yeah. Generate Your Value. The value really lies in the fact that you are having a conversation model of how it is to work with you, but you're doing it in a way that is really pulling out, I'm going to say, the stories, the nuggets, as you put them, the golden nuggets. You pull them out at the right moment. Because if you just went in week after week after week and were really spouting your formula, it wouldn't work. And the fact that you pull in out of your repertoire of all these amazing things of experiences, stories, models of business or models of branding, models of creating value, right? You pull them all out at the right moment, they mean more. They land more.
Yes.
Zach's getting value from that. And we hear that value. We hear the light bulb go off in his head. And that's brilliant because that says to me as a listener, if I work with Andy, I'm going to get value. And this is how it works. That's just a brilliant model for podcasting, but it's a brilliant model for content production in general. The best value that can be brought by content is making me feel like if I work with you, I can do this.
Yeah. So one of my favorite moments is not on my podcast. I went on somebody else's podcast who's a common friend of yours and I's that's based in Nashville. And just like you have your 3 questions, he has his, I think it may be 5 instead of 3 questions. And I was all prepped, was driving up to Nashville, thinking about the questions, all prepped for the answer, right? And we get in the room and do the 1 hour interview, and the questions never showed up. And, he went to his outro.
Threw him out the
window. And I was like, what happened to the 5 questions? And he said, this conversation was just so juicy. and so many nuggets in it that I just sort of threw it out the window and let's just rock and roll with the way this conversation is going. And I just absolutely love that it can bring enough value, to the conversation, into the world, that it's a hook, and it's just like, oh, let's keep drawing, let's keep
pulling
it, pulling out, screw the script, so to speak, and let's just have at it. And it's the one I always, when people say, okay, I want one episode or one interview that you did on another podcast that sort of talks about you and what you're doing, what your platform is, and I always point to that one. It's
That's
even
so
on
great.
my main
So, well, please
webpage
tell
for
us
that
which one
reason.
it is, because we want to refer to it here.
Wow, it's the Jason Duncan show.
Yeah,
Just a
Jason Duncan, he's a good interviewer.
Tremendous entrepreneur. I think we just clicked a lot on our philosophies of life and so forth, and ultimately led to you and I meeting.
That's right. That's how we met. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So, that's what I love so much about the podcasting community, is it's so generous, right? So one host is like, oh, you're going to be so great on Tracy's show. You've got to come on. We're always sharing other people that we know will be good for each other. And that networking has just, I think it's probably, I think it's at least 5x to my business, if not more. Just from that kind of referral network happening, where I was introduced to people who became joint venture partners, or introduced to people who not only were just a guest on my show, but they connected me with 5 more guests. And so I really think that that value of being able to dive into that and create that is one of the main values from podcasting. And you certainly tapped into it well.
I'll add another one. Earlier today, I had a Zoom call with 2 gentlemen who I was on their podcast and interview, but we just clicked so well on it that it's now turning hopefully into a friendship, that we want to stay connected with each other. And, every 2 to 3 months we'll get on the Zoom call and check in each other's lives. They're based in Boston, and
So
I'm
that's
going to
wonderful,
be up there in September, and hopefully we can connect physically for the first time and so forth. But there's so much that podcasting has to offer. A lot of the conversation with the team that helps me get on those interviews is around the value you get in what they call the green room,
right?
Which is that
the conversation before and after
the actual recording and so forth, and the outcomes that could come from it, from either them becoming a client of yours, or a friendship develops, or referrals through a network, or whatever. It's, don't underestimate that piece of it from a podcasting perspective.
Absolutely.
Benefits. Yeah.
And that's where I find the ones that do that sort of, I'm going to call it the marketing model, where they just are trying to cram in as many interviews as possible. They do 15-minute interviews, and they're missing out on it. It's just
they absolutely are. And
yeah.
I had my worst experience was with a gentleman, 30-minute interview, and he was just throwing up lobs of questions from a marketing perspective for my business. There was no true content. There was no nugget type conversations or anything. And
it feels like you're being rented. That's how I look at it, right? Doesn't it feel like your name, your likeness is being rented for their show to create more value for them, but there's no reciprocal value in that. And it's not, it makes it not fun, and it makes it, not as worthwhile to me.
It's a little used. It's like, well, I want to use your story. Your life story and your accomplishments and everything to come on my show in hopes that it keeps people around. And it's just,
I always want my listeners and myself to learn. My podcast is a curiosity podcast. What are you doing? What are you working on? So here's what I want to know as we close this up, Andy, is generate your value. What is one message from your platform, from your business, from everything that you talk about in creating that sort of mindset and actions model that you think is really applied to somebody who's a podcaster, that they can all benefit from?
I'll go back to the creativity piece and your voice, right? You have something to offer to the world. Everybody has their own story. Everybody is a teacher of others. I have a philosophy in life that I don't care if you're the checkout lady at the grocery store or the CEO of a company, I have something to learn from you. So get into podcasting, offer up your gifts and talents to the world, because the world needs it. So it's easier than you think. There's so much benefit that you get out of it. So don't be afraid. Let love push you forward and not fear from that perspective. And so just go for it.
Oh, love and fear. Love conquers fear, right? I love that message that you're sending out.
It's the biggest component in any choice that you make, whether it's where do I go eat dinner tonight, to who's my spouse, or what house am I going to buy, or whatever. It's fundamentally in there. And are you looking at that piece and figuring out where those two things are playing in your head and in your emotions in that choice?
Right. And in your emotions, that's what I was thinking. I think that, I'm really blessed to be very loved in the world. And it gives you a place of, I'm going to say, confidence when you walk out into the world. And so if you can generate that for yourself, if you can get yourself into a deeper place of love, you're going to definitely have more confidence in everything that you do.
Yeah. So Zach and I always end up our episodes with interviews with we ask the guests the question, what do the words generate your value mean to you? So I'm kind of curious, Tracy, what do those words mean to you?
That I'm so glad you asked me that. That, generate your value is, I think it's not a one size fits all. And I like the word "your" in there, right? Because what you want out of the world, what you want out of value it's a different thing. But for me and everything that I do to generate value in the world is a feedback loop to me, right? If I'm making you more successful on your show and you're adding value, I'm adding value to you and you're adding value out to the world, it's the ripples of that excite me. So that's what I want. My generate value is just create this like push off of the ripple and to be the start, the impetus of that in some way, shape, or form. So I got to drop those stones, those golden nuggets into the water and then see what happens from there. So that's how I want to show up in the world. And I feel that podcasting has given that to me, really, really tenfold easily. And that's really my definition of generating value is that creating opportunities for others to create more value, right?
How much do you find it as a conversation starter for you? So people ask me what I do, and the podcasting naturally comes up and the eyes get big. Like, oh, you're a podcaster? Like they think the podcasters are, the Tom Cruises of the world, and they got a big celebrity status. And like, no, you can live down the street and be a podcaster. I mean,
right. Most of them started in their garages.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we get into conversation about it and the benefits of it. It's a great conversation starter.
Right. And so there's the flip of that. Now it's like, oh, everybody's a podcaster now. Like that's the other term I hear. And I said, oh, everybody's a podcaster, but so few are successful ones. And so that's so few are still podcasting, well, and that's the numbers that I love to throw out.
Think about all the self-proclaimed actors and actresses out there that are still being waiters and waitresses.
That's right. Right. Exactly. And I can say, with absolute certainty that I definitely make a living off my podcast. So, so those of us that do that and are podcasters, true podcasters at heart, are generating value either for ourselves, for our businesses, for the communities around us. And that's absolutely what you're doing with your show, Andy. And I'm so appreciative you came to share that with us today.
I greatly appreciate the invite and the tips.
So I told you we were going to get at the value of this sort of on-air model of how you do this. And as you came to know through now having listened to the interview, Zach Levy is his co-host, but it's really his client at the same time. And so you're getting that model of what things feel like. And that's the most important thing that we bring to our customers, right? When our customers can feel what it's like to work with us, when they get a sense of what it's like to be mentored, to be coached, to have conversations with us, to sit down and have coffee together. Like when you get a sense of that, then what we really feel is not only are you accessible as a coach, but you are likely to bring value to me, the listener, right? And I'm more likely to reach out and work with you. And, this is the thing. It's like, I know this personally because that's how this show is, right? So not only am I interviewing great podcasters, but I'm also on air mentoring them, right? There's always some amount of ad that I make every single show where I say, have you considered doing this? And whether or not they answer it that way, it is a way of coaching and mentoring, right? I'm making them think about, wow, I haven't added value there yet. And my questions that I ask every single week, those 3 questions where I'm always asking them about their listeners, how they get great guests, like things like that. I'm demonstrating that for you and building social media content around those topics and subjects because they're the ones that matter most to podcasters. So it's helping me on a business side. But what it is doing is if they're not good at one of those 3 things, and most often they are not good at 1 to 2 of those 3 things, right? They question whether or not I have better insights. Because as they start to realize, she's asking other people. So she asked me, I told her I'm not really as good at increasing listeners as I would like to be. Wonder if she's got better tips. So now we have a continuing conversation afterwards that is mentorship style, right? So now they're looking to me to help mentor them. So when you're hearing these things, when you're seeing this is what it's like to work with me. That's exactly the model that Andy's working on air. So you can see it through his model, right? Because I'm a different personality. And so you need to see people who work through this, who do these models, because this could be the best approach for you if you're doing a coaching, consulting, or any kind of long tail where you need to have multiple conversations to get someone convinced to work with you. Anything that you do that requires that, this model of podcast might be perfect for you. So take a listen to Andy, take a listen to Generate Your Value, and understand what this might look like for you. And of course, you're already listening to the Binge Factor here. And if you've been listening for a while, you know that if you go to the blog post for this episode, you can connect up to Andy directly. You can find all kinds of things about his show, and you can find out all things about the Binge Factor community as well, so you can access me. So thanks everyone for listening. I'll be back with another bingeable podcaster coming up.
You've been listening to the Binge Factor podcast. For more information on podcasting and videocasting success tips and tactics, please go to thebingefactor.com. And be sure to listen to our other show for podcasters called Feed Your Brand. If you'd like to be interviewed on this show, as well as featured in Tracy's column, please go to thebingefactor.com/guest and apply.